truly be who we want to be without a fear of being judged, punished, hated, and or criticized for living our lives on our terms, just the way we want to. Now we are able to make choices that once upon a time women only dreamt of. This was not always the case, and it took a lot of signing petitions, passing initiatives, marching, and protesting just to fight what we believe in to be right. However, sadly, in some parts of the world, people can't fight for what is right. Women still are unable to make choices that determine how their lives will end up. Whether it be for religious or political strengths, there are still areas in the world where people are not able to make their own choices. But here in the United States of America, we have fought long and hard for our rights. That is one of the most beautiful things that we are blessed with, a democracy. A democracy is a government which is led by the people, a form of government in which supreme power is vested in the people and exercised directly by them or by their elected agents under a free electoral system. We are lucky to have a government in which the citizens are truly able to exercise our power directly by electing representatives who stand for what we believe in, signing for initiatives and getting bills passed, allowing the legislative system that basically always allows us to fight for what we believe in to be right. It really does allow us an opportunity to create a world to live in that we are comfortable in. We are finally starting to achieve social justice. Social justice is a balance of distribution of advantages and disadvantages within a society. Over the years, the things that have needed to be changed have changed themselves, so it is an evolving cycle in which we are always having to fight for what is right, to make sure our people are being treated fairly. It is hard to imagine a life where we did not have the choices available to us. It is hard to imagine a time living where women were not understood, were undervalued, and unappreciated. The women's right movement came in waves. The third wave is the wave I will be focusing on. It focuses on equality in the workplace, reproductive rights, social and cultural issues of inequality. After getting the right to vote, women still had many things to fight for. Now we are able to choose what we want to do with our bodies, but could you imagine living in a time where oral contraceptive was not readily available to us? A time where we are unable to choose whether or not we wanted to take a pregnancy to full term or to terminate it just because we were not ready to be parents? We have the right to express ourselves as freely and as openly as we are comfortable with today. The choice is ours, and that liberation is one of the most amazing things to have. There's nothing like freedom. Margaret Sanger, born in Corning, New York, was a nurse, a writer, with a doctorate degree, an advocate, and really the first pioneer for women who stood for social reform. At one point, she even fled the country in fear of her own freedom. She was accredited to opening the first birth control clinics in the United States. This led to her arrest for distributing information about contraceptive. An undercover policewoman actually brought a copy of her pamphlet of family planning and used it to violate her own Comstock laws, which prohibited the spread of information, including literature about obscene topics such as pornography, information about contraceptive, and or abortions. Back alley abortions were extremely dangerous, and some women should have the right to choose whether or not they wanted a baby. Margaret's charges ended up getting dropped because her information in her pamphlet and books were considered to be educational and to stop the spread of disease. In 1916, she later founded the American Birth Control League, which eventually evolved into Planned Parenthood Federation of America in 1942. She passed away in Tucson, Arizona in 1966 before abortions were ever legal. But her contributions to the effort were incredible, and she was one of the first initial advocates for the cause. Catherine Dexter married into the McCormick family. She was a young student at MIT and was heavily involved in the ratification of the 19th Amendment. After this successful monumental moment, she became the vice president of the League of Women Voters. She was accredited in the 1920s for smuggling over 1,000 diaphragms from Europe to Sanger's Clinical Research Bureau, one of the first sets of clinics for women in America. Gregory Goodwin Pincus was a doctor at the Worcester Foundation of Experimental Biology. He started doing research on hormonal birth control in the 1950s. However, he was forced to stop funding the research because he had yet to yield a profit. Teaming up with Dr. Margaret Sanger, Catherine decided it was necessary for the future of America to fund this project. She funded nearly the entire development of hormonal birth control. She provided nearly $2 million of her family's money. This equates to $20 million of today's money. The FDA approved the sale of the pill in 1960, allowing women a new quality of freedom.
The decision to have a child should not be a matter to be decided by the male-dominated legislatures.
The 1960s and 70s ushered in big changes for women in America. From family life to the workplace to reproductive rights, there was a charge for change, known as the women's rights movement. But long before then came the fight for women's suffrage, which granted American women the right to vote in 1919. That movement, led by Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, paved the way for the second wave of feminism in the 60s and 70s. In 1960, family planning was transformed as the FDA approved birth control pills for contraceptive use, opening a new chapter for the career women. About 3 years later, at the urging of Esther Peterson, President John F. Kennedy signed the Equal Pay Act. Also that year, Betty Friedan published The Feminine Mystique, which documented what she saw as the oppression of middle-class women.
We're all housewives when in the beginning and in the end, although we have to be much more than that in the world now.
By the 1970s, women of all ages, races, and backgrounds had joined in the fight for equality. Gloria Steinem campaigned for a constitutional amendment to guarantee equal rights for women. And in 1972, Congress passed the Equal Rights Amendment.
Hey, what do you say? Ratify the ERA!
Though the amendment was never ratified, the following year the Supreme Court would make a decision that would have a profound effect on the lives of American women. In the landmark case Roe v. Wade, the High Court ruled that a woman has a constitutional right to choose to have an abortion. Abortion services were made safer and more accessible to women after the ruling, which would face repeated challenges in later years. Although Roe v. Wade was decided in 1973, the fight over abortion rights and women's equality continued to this day in the U.S. and around the world.
No innovations, make no conditions, get a little out of line. I ain't gonna act politically correct, I only wanna have a good time.